Good afternoon. I will call our study session to order. Will the city clerk call the roll, please?
The record will reflect that Councilmember Rosansky is absent.
The first item is clarification for items on the consent calendar. Mr. Selich?
I have none.
Mr. Hand?
I have one, Mr. Mayor. With regard to item number 6, the OCTA Orange County Transportation Authority Synchronization Plan, I just wanted to verify that this plan will not result in any additional obligations on the part of the city other than things that we're already planning to do.
I don't see the Public Works Director here yet, but I'll ask him that and get right back with you.
Councilmember Daigle?
None.
Councilmember Gardner?
Yes, number 4, we're not approving anything on the wood roofs. Is that correct? That's to be discussed with your group of architects and things?
That's correct in terms of, well, if specifically, we've asked you to consider banning wood roofs in the high fire hazard severity zone.
Right, but there was
That's your
something about a
question.
50% replacement and that sort of thing. Are we considering that also?
No, that's not up
Okay,
tonight.
all right. And
Okay.
then the second one on number 11, which was the Fuji Grill, we are paying a certain amount of money because we're getting, I assume, the improvements. There was a list at the back that said ours were yellow and theirs were gray or vice versa, but there was no color on mine, so I couldn't add up. But is it in favor of the city?
Actually, we're not paying them anything to terminate the lease. There is a rent reconciliation that's occurring, but my discussion with Mr. Lee of Fuji Grill was that because he put all the improvements in on his dime, that he would be able to take the movable improvements out, and that he would leave everything else in, shelving, anything else that's built in. So that's what that list reflects, and you're right, it's not in color and not very helpful to you to see what's on what list. But none of that results in a payment from the city. It's one line is the value of the things that he's taking that he put in. The
Okay.
other line is the value that we're getting of the things that he's leaving.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Webb?
I have none.
And I have no items. So we will move on to the next item, which is the dock reconfiguration at 2901 West Coast Highway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. The presentation will be made this afternoon by Shannon and Chris from Harbor Resources. And I do think the project applicant is here as well. So with that, I'll turn that over to Shannon.
Good evening, Mayor Curry and council members. I'm going to present to you the dock reconfiguration project for 2901 West Coast Highway. Our project applicant property owner is here representing waterfront Newport Beach. They're in the audience. This is a significant commercial marine development project on Mariner's Mile. The project does fit within the city's codes and design guidelines, but we're here seeking further input because of its significance. This is the subject property highlighted in red, and you can see that to the west of it is the Newport Boulevard Bridge. It's right in the heart of Mariner's Mile. This is a close-up of the subject property. It was originally designed in 1985 with 10 slips and side ties to accommodate smaller recreational vessels. And over the last 25 years, it's been modified, repaired, pilings removed, maybe replaced to this current reconfiguration. It's got 5 larger slips, and the slip configuration doesn't exactly meet its maximum potential. For a moment, I'd like you to look at the harbor lines, especially the pier head line and the project line. The pier head line in yellow represents the limit to which a structure can extend bayward. And the project line is a demarcation of the federal channels. It is when the federal government came in the 30s and constructed our harbor. They laid out these lines. Currently, our rules for overhang are that a vessel can overhang the longest finger by its beam width. if you have a vessel that is 10 feet wide, it can overhang that finger by 10 feet. And let's see. Well, currently, we do have overhang. Two of the vessels here would be in the reconfigured property. It is, let's see if this works, right here, the Royal Princess and Ambassador, if I have those correct. The Ambassador does significantly overhang, and that was one of the requirements that we gave Waterfront Newport Beach. They had to rectify the significant overhang by reconfiguring their dock, or Ambassador would have to leave. So they've come to us with the proposal that we have tonight. And these, let's see, we'll go to the next. Sure. That is a 124-foot vessel, and I believe that with the project line, we are at, what that's currently overhanging. I think it's 20 feet. Over the project line. So the proposed marina would be designed so that all vessels would be located within the allowable water area defined by the property line extensions and the permissible overhang of the pier headline. It would accommodate 3 large charter vessels, an additional berthing for smaller vessels, including a publicly accessible water taxi and other marina service vessels. The dock would also be operated as a green marina. This is the proposed configuration. It's a little bit different than what was in the staff report. I've included the pattern of an ingress and egress of a vessel in the lagoon area. It is, the Majestic is the most exterior vessel at roughly 148 feet. The Ambassador, which is currently berthed, which is at about 124, 125 feet, I can't read that, and the Royal Princess, which is currently berthed there as well. The Majestic once berthed in Newport Harbor, but it is so large that we asked it to leave, so it currently berths in Long Beach. With special permission, it will come into the harbor, perhaps for the boat parade or special events. These vessels were surveyed by a marine surveyor to determine their lengths, and this proposal accommodates those lengths.
Since we can't read those dimensions, can you tell me what the dimension is between the pierhead line and the project line? That's the red line.
That's 20 feet.
All right. How far is it from the yellow line to the farthest out line?
31 feet, I believe.
Okay, so that the vessel is extending 10 feet beyond the project line.
Correct, and this configuration actually eliminates about 12 feet of current overhang. So this lessens the current overhang that we have, the overhang violation.
Okay.
Okay. These are the distances in the turning basin. It's about 850 feet to Lido Marina Village to other charter bases, about 870 feet to the residential area on Via Oporto, and about 950 feet to Lido Nord. Race marker Z is right here. Oops, mine doesn't work. It is the nearest race marker in the turning basin. You can go ahead. So the marina benefits would include a custom-built, fully parked passenger stage charter base. It would provide berthing for 3 major charter vessels and other vessels as well. It would reduce water coverage from the originally permitted configuration. It increases harbor water frontage, and it eliminates our overhang violations. The project process is typically when an applicant comes in, we'll issue an AIC, and because of the significance of this project, we've brought it to you for input. If we do proceed with an AIC, we would insert special conditions, including a commercial pier lease instead of our annual pier permit, a revised dock management plan, a fire management plan, along with many other special conditions. And then we would go along with the regular application to the city and concurrent applications to the agencies. And that concludes it. I would go back. I'm sure you have questions, so go back.
Are there questions for staff? Councilmember Gardner.
I'm the one that asked that this be put on a study session. It seemed like there were several issues, not so specifically to this project as far as an up or down approval, but issues that affected the bay, as far as this policy we have of the width and the overhang, and we're getting bigger boats, and is that something that the council wants the Harbor Commission to address in terms of a proposed policy, whether it keep the same policy, change the policy? A larger boat that has been, in a sense, banished from the bay, except for special occasions, will now be a permanent part of the bay. So, as staff says, it's all within regulations, and they could certainly just sign off on it, but it seems something that council might want to opine on as far as some direction, both in overall policy and specifics.
May I add, too, that there are similar vessel sizes in the harbor.
Thank you. Mr. Selich.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I think I understand that there's some kind of federal law that you can't project into the beyond the project line. Is that true or not true?
There isn't a federal law, as far as I know. The project line is for when exactly that, when there is a federal project, i.e. a dredging project. And an example of that was when we dredged here about 6 years ago in the Corona-Del-Mar Bend area on the peninsula, and some of our moorings were outside of their mooring area. And so the government said, well, we can either dredge there and you'll have to move your boats, or we won't dredge there if you don't move your boats. So the next day we moved our boats. So the project line is for exactly that, for the Corps to come in and do their cut right there along that line.
So basically, we just have to keep it clear of fixed structures and things so they can do their dredging.
That's correct.
Okay, and then the other question I had is, why are we looking at approving this before we redo the commercial lease that we're required under the new harbor code? This may or may not be the best configuration. It almost seems like we're getting the cart before the horse.
I believe that we decided to include the lease as a condition, and since this property did come up for permitting, we decided to add it as a special condition.
Yes, we decided to address that because we thought this was an excellent time to address that. Now that the applicant is coming to us asking for permission to rebuild a dock, well, now is an appropriate time to ask for the lease, which is what the code provides.
Okay.
Mr. Webb?
I don't know. Nancy brought it up, and I guess one of the things that bothers me a little bit is how big of a boat is too big for our harbor. I know that I've seen some emails concerning that some of the people that are concerned about the boats that are going around the bay at all hours of the night up to whatever we supposedly say that they can do it to. But it seems like to me that we are really encouraging a little bit more use of the bay by larger boats than I think we should. For instance, how many passengers would you have on that boat, the Majestic, the largest one?
300.
Okay, and the one next door?
150.
So that's 450, and the smallest one, or the smaller one that's on the end?
100.
So that's 550. Now, where are all those people going to park?
The property has secured parking, and the owner
Not 550
and
spaces?
the owner also has secured off-site parking, a parking lot which they also own. And the current configuration has 4 or 5 charter vessels. So we would actually be reducing it. I think the overall capacity is reduced with this configuration.
And
Yes.
the parking requirement is for every 3 passengers, you're required 1 parking space. So you divide 500 by 3.
So you need probably about 170 parking spaces, which is they're saying. I know that that restaurant site doesn't have that many extra spaces. But I'm just, seems like to me it's too big.
Mr. Ham?
Yeah, I guess before I could form a good conclusion on it, I'd need to see some survey information. I'd like to know how many boats that we have that are in the general size category of the Majestic, and of those, how many of them are really private pleasure yachts as opposed to commercial business vehicles like the Majestic. So I'd like to understand that. And then more broadly, on this issue of piercing the federal project line, I'd like to understand how many other places in the harbor are we piercing the federal project line with berthing at the present time. I realize that changes as boats change, but I'd like to get a fix on that approximately right now to understand how big that issue is. One of the concerns that I have in approving this is setting a precedent that could be applicable in other areas of the harbor, or at least argued to be applicable in other areas of the harbor where there's nowhere near this much open water in front of it. And there is a real potential for navigability problems. So I need to see more information before I can really express a view on that. Now, on the issue of the lease, I think to the extent that we're going to write a lease to cover that, we're going to want to write a lease that is based upon the highest and best use, not necessarily this configuration, right? So that's my view of that. So in terms of the economics, the city should accede to the best, most appropriate fair market value economics, which has to be based upon the highest and best use.
Mr. Selich?
Yeah, well, getting back to the lease, who is going to be the lessee? Is it the upland property owner or the owner of the charter boats? And then who's the applicant for the docks? Is it the upland property owner, or is it the charter company?
It is the upland property owner, and the upland property owner will
On
also be
both
the
the lease and the
Yes.
docks?
Yes.
I understand the applicant is here. Would you like to make any comments at this point in time in the proceedings? You're not obligated to, but I...
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Lounsbury for Waterfront Newport Beach. And essentially what we're doing is we are trying to comply with the request of Harbor Resources by proposing to bring the existing fleet, which includes Ambassador, which is the second largest boat that you see there in the drawing, into compliance with and bring in an additional, and bringing in consistent with current harbor and city regulations, and in the process meeting all legal and technical requirements in the process of doing that. Any question?
Thank you, sir.
One more comment.
Mr. Webb?
There's one other item that we haven't really mentioned here is that we had established a bayfront trail in our master plan along this area that's 10 feet wide. And I noticed that if this configuration is proliferated or is used more up and down the harbor in this area, that you might as well not have a bayfront trail because you can't see the water. You'll be looking at nothing but boats as you walk through that. In my opinion, that's one of the problems that we have at Lido Marina Village, is the boats have gotten so big that people don't enjoy walking along the sidewalk there because they can't see the water because of the size of the boat. So again, I'm asking, is this the type of development that we want to try to encourage along the future Mariners Mile Bayfront Trail?
I will just comment for myself here before I open it up to the public that I know there's a lot of concern about the operation of large charter vessels, but they are part of the harbor. They need to be accommodated, and if they're going to accommodate them any place in the harbor, the Mariners Mile area seems to me to be one of the best places to do it. I think the applicant has come in with a strategy working with Harbor Resources that in fact reduces the incursion into the dredge area and does so in a fairly effective way and constitutes a significant investment in improving the harbor. So I think it ought to be seriously looked at, and I think on the whole it's a positive thing taken overall. So with that, Mr. City Manager, unless you had any comments, I'll open it up for public comment.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, maybe some additional direction by the council. Chris does have I think a pretty good summary. I think it's an aerial over the question that Mayor Pro Tem Henn asked, because to me there's two issues to talk about tonight. One is just the general concept of this specific, the specific thought of this project. The other is the general concern that harbor commissioners have expressed about boats protruding past the pierhead line and certainly past the project line. And I think that you can see a good summary of what that looks like harbor-wide. And it also begs the question, I think, as Nancy, as Councilmember Gardner will have heard at the Harbor Commission, they talk about boats getting bigger and wider because of better materials. And the wider a boat, the more it means that our current policy allows that boat, let's say it has a 35-foot width, it can now stick out 35 feet past the pierhead line. You are seeing some of those boats with that technology. So it may be time to revisit that whole concept, whether in the context of this project or others.
I can just flip through this pretty quickly. I've just taken some aerial photos of the harbor here, and I'll try and point out the red line obviously is the project line. This is the property right here. This is Lido Marina Village right here. You've got most of Lido Marina Village over the project line. This is an anomaly right here. This is Harbor Marina. I haven't been able to get a good explanation of what happened there decades ago. As we go down Coast Highway, there isn't too much going on here as far as going over the project line. As we move down, not too much. There is a boat right here that's often brought up that when berthed, it does go past the project line, but it is still legally berthed. Quickly, a few boats here go over the project line. This is Swales Anchorage right here. Now it's Harbor Island area, moving down towards North Bayfront. Not so much. A few here in this area. Working our way down. This looks like one here. Going down Bayside. Now we're going back up South Bayfront. Minor here looks like. Going up around to Collins here. Now we're going to go down Bayside Drive. This is an unusual part of the harbor here because if you notice, the bulkhead line, the pierhead line, and the project line are all out in the water, all past these piers. And the Corps of Engineers back in the 30s envisioned that this would all be filled with land. Well, it hasn't, obviously, but the lines never changed. Nothing here. Going back up the peninsula. A little bit here, and we're working our way up. Oh, pardon me, I went a little fast here. Notice the pavilion itself is over the project line, some vessels there. Bay Island, nothing, looks like there's one there. And now we're going up the peninsula.
Chris, was that the Catalina Flyer that was?
You mean right here?
Yeah.
It looks like it probably is, yes.
Yeah, looks like it, okay.
So now we're going back up the peninsula. There are some boats here along Buena Vista, and we see some on Via Lido Sud. and then some in this area along the Rhine, and again right here on Lido Peninsula. So, and here on Via Lido Sud. So I guess my conclusion is that it's not uncommon to go beyond the project line.
Thank you, Chris. Let me open this up for comments from the audience. Public comment on this matter, please come forward. State your name, please, sir.
John Coro from Newport Beach. I am a consultant to Waterfront Newport Beach, and Mr. Lounsbury has asked me to respond to several of the questions that were raised here, partly answered by staff, but of those that you just saw that Chris mentioned, there are over 360 vessels that both from the 2006 aerial photograph, 2009 aerial photographs, and field checks in 2010 protrude over the project line throughout the harbor. They constitute about somewhere between 15 and 20 commercial vessels, and the rest are presumably private vessels in either private docks or private marinas. The question of what's permitted right now is that there is no, and this has been studied at least 3 or 4 times during the time that I was on the harbor committee or commission. There are no current upper limits in this harbor. We examined other harbors to determine what the criteria would be for upper limits of vessels, and could find no, at that time, could find no consistent means for determining that, so long as there was adequate navigational area for these vessels to maneuver in, adequate channel width, and so forth. And we have a turning basin that's 850 to 940 feet wide, so we have that capability. Our limitation is primarily in draft, and that would be part of the concern there. With respect to how many vessels of what size are in the harbor, I have some figures here that, if you bear with me, I can give you very quickly. There are currently 18 commercial charter vessels, 85 feet to 145 feet, that are home port berthed in Newport Harbor. There are an additional 8 to 10 up to and above 150 feet, which temporarily are present or berthed in the harbor at various times, and this would be the traditional Christmas boat parade types of things. Presently in the harbor, there are 3 vessels that are in the 140-foot to 145-foot range. There are an estimated 35 to 40 private vessels in that same 85-foot to 145-foot range that are home port berthed in the harbor, and about 25 to 30 up to and including 150 feet, which temporarily are present or berthed in the harbor at various times. This does not include brokerage or sales vessels or anything that's here as part of a boat show. There are about 50 to 60 requests a year for private dealer mega yacht berthing, large vessel berthing in the harbor, and I'm not talking about the links or any of the specialty vessels that come into the harbor, but these are entities that are looking for large vessel berthing somewhere in Southern California for a short period of time, positioning of mega yachts for trips to and through the Panama Canal and the South Pacific. And a recent study that our firm performed indicated that there's a documented shortage of over 50 mega yacht berths throughout Southern California, even after you build everything that's currently planned and you use everything that's currently legally capable of berthing that. Now, this is not a statement necessarily one way or the other. It's a response to a question about statistics. the 360 boat overhang situation on the line is divided up, as you just heard from Chris, in some rather interesting ways. And of those, as I said, the substantial number of those are private boats that are caught in the geometry of the harbor that range from 25 feet to 60, 65, 70 feet, all of which are within the normal range that we find in this harbor for private vessels. And yet, even the smallest boats find themselves overhanging that, including an awful lot of Duffys. So it's one of those anomalies that we're trying to solve with the realignment of harbor lines.
Thank you, John. Mr. King, do you have a question?
Yes.
John, don't leave.
Not necessarily of John, but that's fine. I guess without intending to impugn in any way the statistics that John presented, I would feel better if the Harbor Resources Department went over that and understood the sources of that material before we accept that information as part of any decision-making base. And so I would ask that you do that. The other question that I have is that it appears that the federal project line itself is variously determined. Was there any standard that was employed when the federal project line was originally put together? For example, number of feet from the bulkhead line. Was there? It appears that the federal project line varies quite a bit in terms of the distance from the bulkhead line.
It's generally, you know, I don't know exactly what went through the engineers' heads in the 30s, but I can guess they started with the bulkhead line as just a matter of reference, kind of logical. You start with the bulkhead line. It generally goes along the bulkhead in most cases. And then generally the pier head line generally is 80 feet beyond that as a rule of thumb. And then generally beyond the pier head line, 15 to 20 feet, 20 feet is usually the norm, is the project line. That's about all I...
Is that the case at Lido Marina Village, for example, where it looks like almost every boat there is in excess of the federal project line?
Well, I was very careful using the word generally because there are anomalies throughout the harbor, certainly. But I'm just kind of reciting what usually happens, or what the usual distances are between those lines. Thank you.
This
Thank you, John.
material has been furnished to staff.
Thank you.
And I'll be happy to document the sources.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Are there other public speakers on this matter? Please come forward.
Karen Ryan, Harbor Commissioner. I was also chair of our overhang subcommittee, so I can tell you that some of the boats that overhang excessively now are in violation of the current rule. So you have to take that when you go around the harbor. Some of them are currently in violation. And I would ask, I'd suggest that we might have the city attorney look. I was given information, and I'm going to put my glasses on. Title 33, Chapter 9, Subchapter 403, the creation of any obstruction not affirmatively authorized by Congress to the navigable capacity of any of the waters of the United States is prohibited. And that's what I've been advised. I also am a director of Recreational Boaters of California. I did a survey. Our overhang is the most generous of any in the state. Ventura allows none. San Diego has minimal. It's something that I've thought for 2 years at least needs to be looked at, and I think that this boat is an example, or this project is an example of part of the problems. But it's my opinion, and obviously the city attorney will look into it, but I don't think we have the right to impede the federal waterway.
Thank you. Other speakers? Councilmember Daigle.
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Mayor. We just adopted our HAMP, our Harbor Area Management Plan. As I recall, there were some considerations in that plan to make adjustments to bulkhead lines anyway, and it seems as if we wanted to true up lines just to true up lines, we could do that. What I'm wondering is what is the practical problem with exceeding the line and having an overhang?
Well, yes, our Harbor Area Management Plan does address harbor lines, and it provides a framework for us to go about and change those lines if we want to in the future. It wouldn't be an easy task, but it certainly could be done, I believe. I'd have to go back and reread it to exactly answer your question, but I don't know if there's any mention as to if boats or docks go beyond those lines. I don't know if it addresses that specifically.
Okay. Because I guess I would sort of echo what the mayor had to say is, the larger boats do, bring a certain prestige to our community. So if we can facilitate those, I kind of like the idea myself and don't violate laws.
Mr. Rodheim.
Ralph Rodheim. With the Harbor Commission, as you can see, this is an issue that we've been taking a look at the broader issue, not this particular instance, for the last 2 years. We think it really should be a two-phased project. The first one is the overhang issue, and the second issue is the project line. I think the project line clearly was done in 1935, and with proper studies might try to make recommendations on moving it seaward. There's places where the project line probably could. Lido Marina Village, I think, could be extended out. But again, how do we do it federally and all of that? So we take a look at it. However, for the short term, we feel the project line is more than generous. I'm not a paid consultant, so I'm not sure on the statistics, but in going around the bay and counting, I don't see that many. Does this applicant have the right? Yes, they do. Is it the right thing to do? No, it's not. And how big is big, as Councilmember Webb said? It's getting to be a safety issue in the harbor. It wasn't last Sunday, the Sunday before, there was vessels in the bay. There were sailing, there were children. It's a very used bay, and when you get vessels 150 feet plus going up and down the harbor, it really is a safety issue that we're concerned with. The residents I've received since the Daily Pilot article, 2 or 3 calls from residents saying, please stay on it, don't give up. I think we need to look at the size of these vessels. The America's Cup was won by the United States with a boat, Oracle, BMW Oracle, and she was 100 feet long, so we theoretically could build a dock 100 feet long, which you were just on, and her beam is 100 feet. So in this harbor, she could come into the harbor and stick into the harbor 100 feet. We're getting more vessels through more technology that are catamarans, trimarans, and we're really concerned. So at this point, the commission is working on this. We ask that if you do give the project, approve the applicant, which is fine with us, that you put the caveat on not to pierce the project line. And that, no matter how big a boat was, if they didn't pierce the project line, I think that's a pretty good standard that we're still researching and going through all of the issues. Will there be variances to that? Absolutely. We think there need to be variances. There are certain places around the bay you just saw where we would give individual variances just to grandfather them in for the short term. But again, because you can doesn't mean it's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this matter? All right, seeing that, I'm going to bring it back to the City Council. Mr. Kiff, would you like to sort of frame the questions you'd like to see if you can get some response to?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and council members, if it's helpful for us if we hear, we have heard some specific comments about this project, but and if you have any more to add, those are appreciated. And then secondly, if you'd like to provide any specific direction to Chris and to Shannon and therefore then to the Harbor Commission about addressing the overall overhang issue, should we come back with a different policy? Should they come back with a different policy? And or potentially revisiting the project lines too, although I know that that's probably in their work plan anyway.
Let me ask this. Have we reviewed and evaluated the comments of the Harbor Commission and their work in this matter?
Yes, we have. The Harbor Commission commented on in October, and so we have taken their comments into account.
Okay. Probably not to their satisfaction, it looks like. Mr. Selich.
Well, talking about these large boats in terms of the upper limit on the size or the number of them, on one hand, it seems like there should be one, but on the other hand, I have no idea how we would practically come up with regulations to deal with that. And looking at this particular dock configuration in particular, It seems to me that it's a waste of valuable waterfront to take boats and park them at an angle across the waterfront when most of the boats are parked perpendicular. Of course, to park them perpendicular puts them in the position they're in now, where they're violating the project line and the overhead line. And you know, maybe the solution to this property on its own is to look at changing the harbor lines to accommodate a more perpendicular layout for these boats. It just seems like I don't know, it just seems like a waste of valuable waterfront to have angled boats out there as opposed to perpendicular boats.
Councilmember Gardner.
Well, to answer your question, I think that since the Harbor Commission has been doing some work on this, it would be worthwhile to at least have them bring back some suggestions for us to evaluate. We may decide that what we have is what we have, but at least it would be nice to have some creative thinking on the issue of people who are passionately concerned about it. So I would like to see them take a real look at it and bring back something.
Mr. Webb.
I like Mr. Rodheim's suggestion of, at the present time at least, not violate the project line. I think that one of the considerations you have in moving the project line, assuming that you move it into the bay, is that you're now reducing the amount of area that the Corps of Engineers might potentially want to dredge. So therefore, if we're reducing their responsibility, that means we are definitely increasing the city's responsibility. Now, I realize that they have not been over anxious to come in and dredge in this area and spend federal funds on it, but the instance where they did come in and were dredging along and all of a sudden came across the moored boats in the project area and picked up and went home, or almost picked up and went home, I think does give us a really strong indication that if we want them to even begin to consider dredging in our project areas, we need to keep those project areas clear of boats. And again, if we want to move the project lines in, that's fine, but just remember the financial ramifications of that.
Mr. Hammond.
Yeah, I guess I would really like a better understanding from the Harbor Commission about these policy issues here. I do think we need to understand the legal framework that we're dealing with, and so the City Attorney's Office, I think, needs to weigh in on this as to what we can or cannot do as it relates to piercing the project line. And I'm a little reluctant to approve a project that'll be in place for a long, long time before we do have some better feeling for what our policy position is here. I think there is some issue. It's not so much what's the size of the turning basin in front of this dock. These boats on a regular basis ply up and down the channels of our harbor, and there's lots of areas where it's a lot narrower and less navigable flexibility. And so I do think there is a policy issue here about the size and perhaps the number of these boats that ought to be allowed in the harbor. And I do think there is a significant difference between a commercial boat and a large private yacht. Commercial boats regularly, routinely ply the waters of our harbor. Large private yachts likely do not. And so there's a much more intensive use of the harbor with reference to these very large commercial boats.
Mr. Rosansky.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was impressed by the graphic that Chris was showing going around the harbor, and clearly the project line is not sacrosanct. And so I think it does require further study as to where we want to go with that, because, I mean, I see the problems here associated with these large boats and what they're attempting to accomplish here, although, if you remove the boats and just look at the docks, I mean, they could put smaller boats on there and that project would be legal. So it's an issue of the boat, really, not so much the dock configuration. Obviously, Councilman Selich's comment as far as maximizing the utility of the waterfront is important, and I don't know how much the city's involved in that or not. I mean, these are somewhat private decisions as to what you want to build in front of your property, but clearly the city has a stake in it as well because we derive revenue off of these things. And as we're going to move forward tonight and next year or so in the future, we're looking at all types of uses of tidelands and things, and how the city is going to, work with property owners in the future going forward. So there's a lot of issues here, but, I'm not looking to hang these people out when I could see that at least dozens, if not hundreds, of other properties or boats are extending over the project line. So personally, I don't think that's the criteria here. I mean, certainly navigability of the harbor, creating a situation where we don't have issues of safety because, you're running your boat through there at night and all of a sudden a boat's sticking out 25 or 30 feet out into the harbor and you don't see it because, why is that little green light out here when I'm over here? I can understand that. And those are issues that we definitely would want to look at. So I guess it does bear more scrutiny. I don't know where that is so much with the status of the project that we're talking about here. But those are some of my concerns.
Thank you. Councilmember Daigle.
So, Councilmember Rosansky, are you kind of saying the overhang in this situation might be okay?
As the technology has changed over the years, maybe we do need to revisit the overhang rule in general. You can overhang as much as the width of your boat because clearly, you could have a 100-foot overhang, and that clearly doesn't make sense. That's the way out there. So.
Okay. Well, it seems like there's another way out, I think, Councilman Selich's solution, which is you adjust the upland line.
Well, yeah, I mean, the upland line, you're talking about the project line?
In terms of the bulkhead line.
Yeah, well, I don't know that that's what the applicant wants to hear, and that they're going to have to adjust the project line, because you're dealing with the federal government now, and as we all know, that's.
But I think the bulkhead is our purview, is that correct? No?
All three lines, they're all federal lines, bulkhead, pierhead, and project lines.
Yeah, so, maybe that is a goal, maybe that's something that we need to look at as far as the overall management of the harbor going forward, but, clearly that's not going to solve this problem today.
Well, I think we've left you fairly confused. I'm sorry, Ed, one more chance to clear it up, Ed.
Now you got lost my train of thought there. Chris, if we don't go along with this configuration right now, there's nothing that prohibits them to keep using the slips as they are now, shown in the photographs, correct? While the Harbor Commission studies this?
That is correct. However, they still need to bring their current boats into a line because we've given them a warning letter saying that your boats are exceeding their allowable limits. And we also said that if you're making due diligence and trying to work through a dock configuration, that'd be okay, knowing this process takes a long time.
Wouldn't that count if the Harbor Commission was working on trying to come up with a solution here?
Yeah, I guess it would.
So they don't get penalized on this?
Yes.
Because I think it needs some further study too, as I'm sitting here thinking about it. And if we are going to have the Harbor Commission look at this issue on a larger scale, I'd like to have them take a look at disbursement of these larger boats too, because I think one of the situations that Councilman Webb brought up with when you get a large concentration of them, they block the view of the water, and if we could get them spread out a little bit, that would probably be of some assistance too. But I'd support having the Harbor Commission come back with some kind of recommendations to us on it.
Yeah, and I'll add my support to Councilman Selich's view here that if we're going to in effect ask this particular applicant to stay their application, if you will, they shouldn't be penalized. Yeah. And that includes if they have occasional need to dock the Majestic in here, as they have in the past. In other words, there ought to be just a stay of the present situation without penalty while we're working on a greater policy issue here.
Yeah, well, not to be redundant, but yeah, I think to keep the status quo as it is now, allow them to use the docks and the configuration that they have until we come to some further resolution of these issues would be the smart way to go.
Mr. Webb.
One other issue related to the number of these larger boats is, at least during the summertime when the yacht clubs all have the regattas going every weekend, I don't know how many of you have been in a 14-foot boat and had all your wind taken away from you for a while as the boat goes by when you're in the middle of the race. And so I think that we need to look at the number of boats that are out there when we have the heaviest recreational uses, because this is a recreational harbor. And we need to, I think, give the small boats a chance and some room to maneuver.
I would just close by saying I would echo the comments made by Mr. Selich and Mr. Ozansky and Mr. Hinn, and I think Councilmember Daigle. You know, somewhere here there is a good sense answer, and we need to get to the good sense answer about how we accommodate the cruise boats in the harbor, how we dock them, how we draft the rules. I agree that we should not prejudice the applicant here because of our inability to make a decision. And I think we need to more carefully perhaps consider the comments and thoughts of the harbor commissioners aimed towards finding a solution so that we can have a multi-purpose harbor that accommodates a lot of uses at a lot of different times during the course of the year, because that's what we really have faced here. Okay? All right. Let's move on to the next item, which is item 3, Lido Village conceptual planning.
As we do that, Mr. Mayor and council members, I wanted to make sure the audience knew that there is a fourth item that I've asked to be postponed. That involves Balboa Yacht Basin rates. So if anyone is here for that meeting, you don't have to stay. But hopefully there are a lot of folks here for the next item, which is something that has been worked on a lot the past couple of months. And I don't know if Mayor Pro Tem Henn, if you had some preliminary thoughts. Otherwise, we'll send it over to the consultant. But
you know, I'd rather not take the time for me to talk, so I'd just as soon get to the presentation and let's get some feedback here.
So we do have a little bit of extra time to spend on this. It's an important project. It's an important planning effort. Jim Campbell is the lead staff member with the planning department, and but Tim Collins is our special consultant on this, and I'll hand that off to them to take it from here. Thanks.
Good evening, members of the City Council and Mayor. While you're being handed some copies of the PowerPoint presentation you're about to see, I'd like to just give some introductory remarks. This is our third public forum dealing with the planning for redevelopment of Lido Village. Our objectives tonight are to narrow down from 4 optional plans that you will be presented to 2. We'd like to get input from you all on the preferred features. We expect that there will be some tendency to mix and match, if you will. You're going to hear preliminary comments from the market consultant as to where the demand lies and what some of the economic feasibility issues are. Although we, due to the constrained agenda tonight and our time frame, we will not be presenting numbers. Nevertheless, we will give you some programmatic input from a fiscal perspective. We also would like to get some guidance on what deliverables you'd like to see for our next presentation, which is scheduled for, I love this one, 1/11/11. We think it's time that we start to present some vertical and graphic illustrations to go with these plans that you're seeing in plan view. Before I introduce the architect, I want to step back and revisit what this project is about. Todd Larner will overview what we've learned, and this is a slide that we have updated now 3 times that will show that this has been very much of an evolving and progressive process, which really has only been completed of late, and I mean completed in terms of all the data gathering, which was a Herculean chore, and I want at this point to thank Jim Campbell and his staff for the support that we've had as a kind of a private team working outside the City Hall to be able to get all the data that we've needed. We have learned in the course of this work that we have some real challenges to have an integrated plan which is made up of, as you know, 3 major stakeholder property owners plus 7 other minor owners and lots of competing demands. Not unlike the presentation you just had on the harbor, there's no lack of interest and use in this village area. The inventory of current uses you will see presented on a couple of the exhibits for the first time in terms of the inventory of square footage, the FARs, and of course the all-important parking coverage. We are going to address briefly a few of the public comments that we've received. There were many, to show how they've been integrated, and then we're going to step back and reaffirm the major stakeholders' vision and views that input to us all along the way. We don't ever stop reference to that guidance. The plan refinements from what you saw at a 50% state are a few. The need for phasing has gotten a lot more line drawing and visibility in this update. Phasing in that certain major owners are going to be prepared to move with improvements and upgrades before others are, and to be able to accommodate those demands, and in one case, in one of our owners, a growing sense of urgency, we need to have a phasing plan and a plan that can come in over the years. We also have had to consider now some new project opportunities. For example, two of the buildings inside the project area changed ownership last month, and that owner has come to the table and is working with us and inputting what his expectations are, in one case with an entitlement he has already received, and another with one that he seeks to come forward with in the near future for some housing product. The first time you will perhaps hear, and maybe in the closing remarks from the stakeholders tonight, and that is that there may be need for some concessions. We have the proverbial 5 pounds trying to fit in a 4-pound box. Lastly, the sense of place is starting to get some attention, and the gateway features you will be seeing for the first time. Most important to you councilmen tonight, though, is with regard to the reuse of the City Hall site, you will hear for the first time a little bit about 3 major opportunities, 3 distinct opportunities for either public use outright, as in the case of the fire station, or public use, public benefit options, which may include a lifelong learning center, senior housing, or a health and fitness wellness center concept. We will end, of course, with the public being able to input in Q&A, and I would ask for those that have an interest in speaking that due to the limited time that you not repeat and try and hold to the council protocol of 2 to 3 minutes max, and please do introduce yourselves when you come forward. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Todd Larner with William Hesmalhawk Architects from Santa Ana, who is the lead planner on the project. Todd?
Good evening, council members, Mayor Curry. My name is Todd Larner with WHA, and we have been participating in this project for some September. And in going through this plan, it's truly been a collaborative effort between the city, the major stakeholders, and also minor stakeholders, as well as the city residents. So we've been taking all these different variables and putting them into a plan and coming forward with a concept plan for this area. Again, big ideas, concepts, implementation ideas to make it go forward. So as Tim had mentioned, one of the big themes that we keep on talking about is what have we learned? Again, understanding the sites is huge. Consensus building, as I mentioned, was a gigantic point of what we're doing. And phasing implementation has always been big from the very beginning and trying to establish who goes first and how we're going to be able to make it work. So during this process of what we've learned, we looked at the site as an overall site. We looked at not just the 4 main parcels in here, but also the surrounding area. We really looked at the connection to the beach, to the bay. We looked at the gateway opportunities coming down from Newport Boulevard and going across Pacific Coast Highway. We looked at 32nd Street and also via LIDO as the circulation patterns involved. At the very beginning of this process, with all the stakeholders involved, with all the different consultants involved, we established a set of guiding principles. And you can see here in blue where we've actually tested these and validated these against the plan. And in going through these, we really want to make sure that we keep on checking ourselves against these. And the most important part is we really want to create a plan that is approvable by the council, by staff, by stakeholders, and the California Coastal Commission. Again, from the very beginning, we wanted to create a plan that is implementable or contextual to Newport Beach, not something that's dropped in from another place. So during this process, we had our technical advisory panel, which is what we started off with. And the technical advisory panel is a group of consultants who are on our team working pro bono, looking at the different ways that the site could come together, from traffic, from engineering, from marina design, all the way through to architecture and landscape architecture as well. So in that, we came up with some 4 big ideas of what the site could be. And this is where we started, after this point is where we started engaging the public forum, where we had 2 separate sessions. But we really came up with 4 big ideas: maintenance plan, a Main Street plan, connectivity, going from the beach to the bay, as well as a canal plan. That was one of the big ideas for water quality. All the time, we really wanted to make sure that we were establishing a gateway that was a nostalgic place that it created experience, that it recognized sustainability not from a social standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint. And then also create a destination, really make sure that it's for the people, but also for the surrounding area. So during our initial community feedback, these are some of the major points that were voiced by minor stakeholders as well as citizens of the city of Newport Beach. Again, parking. We've heard it from day one. Parking has been a major, major problem within this area, and we wanted to address that. I think we heard a lot about charter yachts already tonight. That was a big concern about the LIDO Village, and what Councilman Webb had mentioned, that you look at the back end of a boat when you're walking down the boardwalk. So that was a concern for people, but they wanted to still engage the water and still celebrate it. Again, the nautical heritage, we really want to celebrate it for our city, create a sense of place. And, you know, there were also some concerns about eminent domain, so we're very respectful of landowners and not changing their plans beyond what they wanted, and really kept it as flexible as possible. But one of the things that we kept on hearing over and over again is make sure we have a big vision. Let's not get stuck with the status quo, and that was our charge. So once we had all that information, once we had the initial concepts, we started going back and looking at the visioning and creating what is Newport Beach. Newport Beach is about the water. It's about memories and all these things that come together. We really want to tap into the vision of a place because it helps it make it feel intuitive, or make it feel that it belongs, as opposed to dropping in something from another place. And again, nostalgia is a huge component of what Newport Beach is, and it's about experiences, and we want to preserve those experiences about the water. So with all those components in the visioning, this helps establish a character, an architectural theme for where we go forward while we implement the architecture and the components. So again, these are some of the components or visioning images that we've been circulating in our 50% meeting with staff, as well as our meeting with the stakeholders. But really talking about scale, talking about walkability, bikes on the water, talking about how we engage the waterfront here. Again, having families use the water, but also at nighttime, make sure it's not just a daytime use. Another thing is creating the outdoor living room and creating senses of place where the automobile falls away, but also certain times where the automobile comes together with the people. Establishing nighttime venues like an outdoor movie theater, and really creating that dynamic daytime, nighttime activity. And those are some of the components that we want to incorporate into the plan. Again, one of the major components is the fire station reuse, moving the fire station closer to Newport Boulevard to help serviceability. And the fire station serves as a great icon of civic use. And in the nighttime, you can light it up and it looks great. And it's a constant reminder of the pride of the city by using the fire station as that hallmark building. The hotel is a component that we've looked at in the area, a boutique hotel, high-end, small room count. But that would be something that would be the last phase within the project because it's such a destination, and there's a lot of issues associated with the hotel that need to be resolved. But it creates a destination use for local residents as well as visitors, and helps keep the tax base and keep people there spending money. It's another idea why we wanted to do it. Again, one of the big components about possibly is a gym spa facility within the civic use area, and that the gym doesn't have to necessarily be a YMCA or a low-quality building. It can be something that's high-end, that is a hallmark building that looks more like a featured architectural element as opposed to a back-of-house use. So once we had all this information, once we did the visioning, once we did the concepting, we started laying into 4 big ideas, the maintenance plan. And the big idea of the maintenance plan was reestablishing the waterfront along Vernado's piece, reestablishing the city hall use right here, looking at a civic reuse where we could put some sort of sports facility, putting in meeting rooms, but also relocating the fire station at this point and moving it from its existing location to over here. Alternative number 2 was looking at really establishing a main street, looking at reestablishing vehicular circulation to create a block, or re-implementing the grid system within the city. It also looked at improving the Vernado piece right here, and possibly doing some sort of water enhancement element right here with the dock configuration, and really creating a destination yacht basin for these large luxury yachts. Alternative number 3 is the connectivity plan. We really wanted to reinforce this connection from the beach to the bay, and then also introduce a wellness center component with the City Hall reuse site, and that you would have a wellness campus that would encourage classes, that would have physical therapy, that could be more than just for meeting rooms and all. It could be more than just a civic site that didn't give back. This would be a give back place, especially by creating pedestrian linkages all the way to the bay. And the fourth alternative, which was one of the most dynamic, was recreating the canal, establishing a canal system that connected from the bay and tapped into the Finley tract, behind the Finley tract to West Newport. And this was a water quality implementation plan. It really established a series of individual villages and neighborhoods, and it introduced a concept of a lifelong learning center. We've seen in many master plan communities where we have professional for-profit universities coming in and establishing classrooms and campuses that are in conjunction with civic and city hall uses. So that was the big idea for this concept. So once we had all the four concepts out, we circulated it to staff, we circulated it to the stakeholders, and we started getting feedback. And when we got the feedback, we were narrowing down the plan from 4 to 2. And we really realized that there's a lot of opportunities with these plans that they all incorporate. And we're taking pieces of each and putting it into these 2 final alternatives. And so, again, the main part is beach to the bay. We really wanted to make sure that pedestrian connectivity was implemented. We also wanted to look at, the party boats or the large yachts are a very big concern. And maybe is there a way to reconfigure them and still keep them in the area to help facilitate different uses and different on and off peak hours. Look at creating an iconic bridge or a gateway element connecting Mariner's Mile to the Balboa Peninsula. Also, there's been some discussion about the flexibility for the City Hall site and the different uses that can go in there. And when we've talked about the Civic City Hall site is that we've looked at different opportunities for putting in seniors, high-end residential, a wellness program, or the lifelong learning. These are all components that we can put in from a program standpoint that would help benefit the city with the reuse of the site. And also, we really wanted to make sure that there was a revenue opportunity for the site and that the parking wasn't just going to be a giveaway, that it needed to be some sort of revenue basis for shared parking scenario. One of the big opportunities that we also recognize is that there could be a shared parking program for the different landowners and uses within the area. And along with opportunities, there are some constraints. And so in going through the different 4 plans, again, the parking deficit was a major constraint. On the Vornado piece, the existing long-term ground leases are proving problematic for them, as well as trying to create or implement a plan. And then also, one of the opportunities is that in looking at the site and talking to different stakeholders, there's a definite cost balance from an improvement opportunity versus building replacement. Do you keep it? Do you get rid of it? Do you improve it? There's a lot of things going on with that. We also recognize that the general plan, when it served its purpose to move forward, there's maybe some opportunities for a specific plan overlay to look at future flexibility to maximize the potential for the site. Again, phasing is a major commitment or a major issue with the parking, buildings, street improvements, docks, bulkheads, fire department. There's a lot of things going on in order to make this work. And then thinking of the box and unifying a visionary plan has proven difficult as well in trying to put all these pieces together. One of the other constraints with the site is also signalization, getting people on and off the peninsula, we recognize. Coming across Pacific Coast Highway, coming down, there's a lot of spacing and signalizing and sequencing that needs to be established if we're going to be intensifying this area. The other thing that we were really, was a constraint that we were going through, that we really recognize that there needs to be some thoughtful preparation on how the bike and the pedestrian and the motor vehicles interact with each other, and with the uses and how they're laying out in the existing conditions, it's proving more problematic than before. One of the other things that it's, because there's so many different edges to these sites, is that four-sided architecture is becoming difficult as well, because there's certain needs of each of the individual landowners that you have to have service areas, that you have to have maintenance areas. And so by looking at this, it's being a little bit difficult. Also, Coastal Commission support, and in hearing the presentation before us and the bulkhead line and the other lines that are associated with the improvement of the harbor, Coastal Commission and now the federal agencies might prove problematic as well. So you can see here up on the plan, we've come up with 2 concepts. Alternative 2A, which is based upon an earlier plan. And in these plans right here, I'll start off down here. This is the existing City Hall site right here. We are looking at doing a concept plan that this becomes a Civic Hall reuse site, a wellness site with the fire department right here, a civic use along here, whether it's classrooms or buildings or facilities. There's enough room for a gym, creating a large enough parking structure to help facilitate and carry all the different uses that would be here, but then also bolting on some retail along this edge, along 32nd Street, to help hide the parking structure from this edge right here. In moving north to the Via Lido Plaza area, looking at increasing the parking field out in front here, helping them facilitate a new tenant with a larger box along here, providing a circulation element that puts their service back in here and pulling it up so it doesn't conflict with the proposed residential that is going to be down in this area. And then also taking the Via Lido Theater right here and ringing it with retail on the first floor and possibly increasing the theater component on the second floor and providing maybe a pedestrian bridge that crosses from the parking structure on top here over to this area. That's one of the initial ideas. Again, maintaining the Griffith Building right here, the Lido Theater right here, but then also looking at reconfiguring the docks along here in the bulkhead. There's a concept that we discussed with staff, and that there's a potential that the bulkhead could be improved. It needs to be improved. It's not in good shape, but cantilevering it over the water. And then reconfiguring the docks right here to allow pedestrian views and long-range views down the harbor as they enjoy this pedestrian promenade right here. There's also been some discussions about putting a pedestrian bridge or improving this connection point over to Mariners Mile and getting people off the peninsula and creating that connectivity. So with alternative 2A, we're keeping Via Oporto, but downgrading it to more of a service drive as opposed to a public street. That would help facilitate the service component of the new proposed big box that would go here, but then also it helps service the access to the parking structure on the City Hall site, as well as getting through traffic through here. We've also looked at the pinch point right here with Via Lido and Oporto, and it's a very dangerous intersection, and we've addressed that by providing traffic calming to slow down the flow of traffic to some degree, but not prohibit the level of service on that street. And then, again, with the Vornado piece, it's, again, right now they're finding it difficult to secure the long-term leases. They're having problems. Their goal right now is to stabilize the property, to try to improve values, and then look at a long-term goal, and that's what alternative number 2 looks at. Alternative number 2 really starts looking at a little bit more aggressive plan, especially when it comes to the Vornado piece, introducing a potential hotel site here. We met with Vornado last week. We went through the design concepts here, and what this would do would be eliminating Via Oporto back through here, maintaining the existing property lines, and reconfiguring the buildings to have a first floor and second floor opportunity. We also looked at providing an idea or a vision of providing a pedestrian bridge over to Mariners Mile. This is a concept plan, and it's a concept of connecting the people directly to the boardwalk right here and providing a second level promenade along here to get people up above the waterline and up above the docks that we proposed there. Again, we incorporated through, there was a lot of positive feedback for incorporating a new marina or a new dock design here that would house very high-end yachts, very luxury-based yachts, and kind of almost like a show-off dock like you see in the south of France or in Florida and places like that. They would keep their existing parking structure right here and their 400 parking count that they have up in that area, and it would be maintaining this service drive back here for all the individual shops and maintaining this the storefront right here, but we would propose that possibly there's an overlay to increase square footage or heights in there. Again, this is part of the concept idea. The other component of this plan is looking at the Via Lido Plaza. It's very similar to the one before in that you have a larger field of parking right here. You have a service and circulation element going to Via Lido, but then also we've taken the parking, putting some parking on top of the building and the box right here, but introducing some potential live work that could happen here, where they would be parked within the parking facility right here, but then also improving Via Oporto to a two-way street. And everyone from the very beginning has talked about maybe abandoning Via Oporto, but we took the idea of maybe we increase it to a two-way street and we ring it around and introduce more shops and having this walkability component into the area that is missing right now. And so the idea would be that the service bays would be shielded by the live work, but then also introduce on the City Hall site more of a civic reuse with this area right here and do a either a campus, a lifelong learning campus, or a wellness center associated with some senior housing that could fit on there. And our preliminary numbers are about 80 units that are on there. And the idea was that you would energize and create a full circle street or a walkable street or a main street in this area, and it would be very intuitive to drive around and use that. So the other components that we've also looked at with the City Hall site or this whole area is that different landowners that own these parking lots right here and the owners that we've talked to here want to introduce more residential into the area, which is part of the general plan. It's within the prescribed zoning in there, but really exercise introducing more residential so you create a more dynamic, as opposed to all retail or all commercial, you have a residential component as well. So where we are right now, we've come through quite a bit of studying, quite a bit of outreach, quite a bit of input, and we stand right here right now. We're at the 23rd right here, and from here on we're going to start, we are finalizing the plans. We feel we're at 80 to 90% of where we need to go, and we're going to start running the financial numbers for the plan as we move forward from here and validating what's going on. And so by 11/11, we'll try to figure out the components that are going to be going into the City Hall site. And it's establishing kind of a plug and play where we have a framework for the City Hall site, we have a parking structure or not, but then we really are able to maximize the potential for the City Hall site, whether it's seniors, whether it's for rent, whether it's for sale, whether it's a civic use, whether it's all these different components. This is where we're going to start testing it from a financial standpoint. Right now, I'd like to have Richard Gaulis or John Shumway come up and talk about some of the preliminary financials on the plan. What's that?
Whatever you want to talk about.
Okay, so we'll talk about some of the potential for the site.
Great, thanks, Don. Thank you, Richard Gaulis with the Concord Group, Mr. Mayor and council members. In looking at the alternatives, one of the critical issues, if not the most important issue from our perspective, was what land uses are market-driven for the overall perspective in the property, and what land uses are community benefit-driven. In particular, how can we look at this as a master plan area that creates synergy across the property lines, in some cases from a market and economic perspective, initially ignoring the property lines, to really understand what can be supported and what works within the context of what Todd described for the master plan. And so as we went through the program, we identified a number of alternative land uses that are economically and market-driven and supportable over a longer period of time. Our look was not focused on what's happening with today's economic conditions, but rather what's happening in a 5, 10, 15, or even 20-year time frame as our markets recover and our values return. From a housing perspective, we understood or identified opportunities for a series of uses, including rental housing, for sale housing in various configurations, as well as housing targeted to seniors. On the retail perspective, we did identify a gap, meaning an opportunity for various types of retail, such as high-end grocery, as well as other kind of specialty uses. We also identified an opportunity for a hotel, as Todd described, boutique hotel, fairly small scale, but the one that can fit into the opportunity of hospitality within the city and the greater market area. And finally, we understood the opportunity, based on the capacities of the land uses, to have revenue-generating parking as part of the plan, which is also an economic engine. And then finally, the reuse of the marina slips, or the reconfiguration of the marina, is another opportunity that we looked at from a market perspective. So when we compared these alternatives, you go back to 2A for a second, sort of at a high level, we were focused in on looking at what are the values that are being created in terms of built space, what is happening in terms of land value overall, what's happening in terms of revenues that would come back to the city of Newport Beach in the form of either recurring revenues from either property tax share, retail tax share, transient occupancy tax share. What could be the opportunity for the City Hall site as it relates to ground lease or ultimately land value if it were decided to monetize that way to sell, or a ground lease perspective, because there may be a decision that we don't want to dispose of the property. And then finally, what could happen as it relates to parking. So just in terms of big numbers, in these terms of these two plans, they would generate, in terms of total value, somewhere in the range of $240 to $300 million of ultimate built value, which would generate to the city recurring revenue, once it's built out over time, of ranging between $1.5 and approximately $2.5 to $3 million per year, again, between the two plans, 2A being a lighter intensity than 2B. In terms of the value of the city property, City Hall property, it was kind of an interesting way of looking at it, but we identified the potential land value of the 4 acres ranging, again, depending on the way the land uses are mixed and how it's configured, ranging from approximately $8 million up to potentially $15 million. Again, depending on the mixing and matching and how the different uses come together, which could generate a ground lease, again, additional recurring revenue, of anywhere from approximately $1 million to over $2.5 million per year, depending on how that's structured. The critical perspective from our view is the thinking that would go into the plan as we move forward about how we're going to handle the decision about where we place various land uses. And therefore, in the early comment, we kind of ignored property lines, but recognizing how the different stakeholders and property owners want to utilize their property to identify what market capacity or community benefit opportunity we can place on our City Hall property. At the end of the day, when we work through this process, we're going to want to get input specifically from council, from staff, and ultimately from the stakeholders and from the community members as to how we can best fit, in a sense, the different goals and objectives from an economic perspective onto the various properties. But overall, as we look at it, we see a tremendous opportunity to generate long-term recurring revenue for the city of Newport Beach, while at the same time maximizing the individual opportunities for the stakeholders and private property owners.
Thank you.
Just a quick question before you leave. As to the individual stakeholders here, the 3 major stakeholders, I guess 4 now with the Marshall Group, but these configurations that you're talking about don't involve any one stakeholder being disadvantaged versus their present circumstance.
That's correct.
Okay.
As far as we, correct, true statement, right.
Or disadvantaged one from another in the ultimate realization of these plans.
That's correct, and I think we should add the major consideration or concern that was on our summary points was the issue of parking and parking management. So the solution to how we deal with parking across the different boundaries is going to be a major determinant, I think, to the answer to that question from the perspective of the city and or the perspective of the stakeholder.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick summary observation before taking council's questions, and that would be that this study has determined that in its existing configuration, Lido Village of approximately 17 acres has deficit parking. If we were to accommodate and park the cars according to today's code, add the amenities for a sense of place to give the added circulation, the outdoor living room, the pedestrian access, the features you've seen on the 4 alternatives, the village needs to be 20-plus acres. Suffice to say, the deficit exists today, and it constrains even more the opportunities that you've had outlined. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions and direct them to members of the team.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Collins? Councilmember Gardner.
I liked the presentation. I was excited. Boy, this, that, wonderful. What happened to the canal? I love that. Until I got to the 2A and 2B, and I think that there was a lot of originality with the Lido Village, which is obviously maybe the easiest one to deal with in some senses, but the way it's opened, both ideas, opening up the waterfront and using it more, those are terrific. I found the other areas more pedestrian and even a little bit disappointing. I'm not, and I realize that a lot of thinking went into it and a lot of back and forth and compromises, but I'm a lifelong learning center doesn't, I don't know, is that something that's really popular? I mean, something that there's going to be great demand for? To me, I was sort of like, huh? And that's just mine. It may not be what everybody else thinks. And the thing I did notice about that disappointed me a bit and that may be just because this is so rough in terms of what you presented, is we have this great climate, and I didn't see some outdoor stuff here on our site. I know that there had been talk, some people wanted a park or something and felt there was a better economic use of it, but a wellness center, I mean, I use the wellness center at the Oasis, it's great, but I don't see any outdoor stuff. Maybe there's outdoor dining, I don't know, over on the village side, but that's what I don't see, is a lot of green stuff, which I think would make this even more walkable and livable and enjoyable.
Mr. Silich?
Well, I guess I'm a little disappointed. I was hoping for something that maybe was, well, when you look at when you went to the beginning of the presentation, there's a lot of good ideas all thrown out in the different alternatives, but it seems like the two alternatives that were chosen were the most, for lack of a better term, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but more mediocre of all the different ideas. It just seems to me this area has so much potential that I don't know, there's a certain lack of imagination in this. I guess I've got a couple of questions and maybe a couple of comments. One of the things I was surprised at was that in all of your alternatives, you didn't look at realigning Via Lido down 32nd Street and then doing something different with Via Lido through the area, as opposed to having Via Lido be the major street that kind of divides the whole area in two. Not to say that it wouldn't be a street, but just a different kind of a street than it is now. I thought, when I first looked at the diagram, when I saw all the parking out on Newport Boulevard, the first thought that came to my mind was an Irvine shopping center, and not Newport Beach, where it would seem to me would have more buildings fronting out on Newport Boulevard. In alternative 2A, does that stay within the limits of our general plan, or do we have to do a general plan amendment to get that done?
The higher density?
Yes, 2A.
It's 2A or 2B?
2B, I'm sorry, 2B.
2B does stay within the 1.2 FAR that is required for that site, but it doesn't fall within the height restrictions. You would have to go above and beyond, and that's why we would suggest or vote for a specific plan overlay.
Okay. And then I guess I would, what you said, Councilman Gardner, is I don't know what the demand for a wellness center is, but it's almost like we're hunting for a use to put in here to come up with something like that. It seems, just doesn't seem something that, to the top of my mind, would be something that would have down here in this particular area. And I agree with Councilwoman Gardner's comments on just more pedestrian open areas. I don't know, it just didn't seem to come to the level I thought we were going to come to in this.
Any comment, questions from Mr. Collins? Mr. Webb.
At the very end of your presentation, you indicated that there's a parking deficit. So what is that parking deficit approximately?
Approximately 180 cars.
And how much parking is being provided? So percentage-wise, what would that be?
About 25%.
Okay,
So another way to look at this, and it responds to Mr. Selich's and a couple of other observations, is to correct that, we have the challenge of either granting some flexibility within the general plan uses or taking away FAR. My comment about we got 20-plus acres of need and not quite 17 acres of availability. That's correcting the deficit, and with regard, take for example the Via Lido Center, to accommodate what they have there today at today's code parking will not allow them to keep the size of retail space that's currently on the site. So to try and add some uses becomes problematic.
I guess the question is, do we have any idea of what the current today parking deficit is in this area, the same area? I would imagine it's probably pretty close to what, 25%.
That is today's deficit.
Okay, well, I'm talking about, with this plan, what would it be?
We balance it. We
Oh, okay,
balance
so your new plan is.
We have
okay.
parked the village, but we have squeezed out many of the WOW benefits. The
Okay,
circulation, the
that
open
was what I was
space.
trying to find out is
Yeah.
whether or not we have.
We have cured the parking
We are
deficit.
continuing the parking problem that we have today, and your answer
May not
was
have them
no.
in the right place, but the inventory balances the required code parking.
Okay, so that we have provided the parking necessary. That's what I was looking for.
Mr. Ham?
I guess I have a question. First off, these configurations of these docks in either version, I think, are a tremendous improvement over what's there. So I really do like that. I wonder about although I love the dock configuration on 2B, I wonder about the feasibility of that now that we understand federal project lines and all this other. But I'll tell you, it's not just the docks, it's the creation of public space on the water. To your concern, Nancy, that's one of the things that I really like about 2B, is that we do create much more toes in the water, with that plan. I guess I have a specific question regarding the parking. I'd like to understand what the differential impact on parking demand is for the tour boat requirement versus no tour boat requirement. Now, I'm not suggesting a final answer here. I'd just like to understand what that delta is. Is there if the tour boat use that's incorporated in these plans were eliminated in this area, perhaps moved to somewhere else in the harbor, I don't know, but were eliminated in this area, how much would that free up for us in terms of additional open space, additional other kinds of uses, and more creativity to the plan than is currently here? It seems to me that's a big demand that really adds nothing to the sense of place that we're trying to create. In fact, in a lot of respects, it detracts from it in terms of the size of those boats and the visibility of the water and all of that. I'm not trying to pick on the tour boats, but it does seem to me to be a big differential factor here, potentially at least, and that's why I'd like to understand the facts of that.
Yes, I had some questions maybe for the Concord group about, they mentioned some of the revenue numbers, and I noticed on one of your slides an objective was City Hall as a revenue driver, and you provided some numbers on a recurring long-term revenue. Did you ever look at kind of a one-time sale? And then I guess with that is what different land uses, would look like, would produce a more favorable number. I don't know what a wellness center would sell for, but you know what I'm saying. If somebody gave you the job of saying what would be the objective here is revenue, one-time sale, what land uses would you put on that property?
Yeah, good question. Let's go back to the slides. Based on the way the either 2A or 2B are configured, there's some similarities there. One of the challenges, as Mr. Collins identified, was how to figure out where to put the parking. So as the plan evolved, we ended up with some significant amount of parking on the City Hall site. So that was kind of one of the constraints to deal with that number one issue. But to answer your question, most directly, the highest value land uses really relate to the housing and potentially the hotel in a mixed-use retail setting. But the best place to put those are in either a neighborhood setting closer to Via Porto or Via Lido, or as it relates to the hospitality up on the waterfront. And so from sort of a feasibility perspective, where we ended up in terms of the mix of uses within the district was leaning towards uses that are compatible and sort of synergistic with the uses nearby and with the residential base. And as it relates to the wellness, talking to the local hospitals, as well as some of the integrated medical providers about looking at how to serve the area, recognizing also the opportunities or primarily some of the constraints associated with the relocation of the fire station. We concluded that the best opportunity there was going to be either the senior housing as well as some of the civic uses, plus fulfilling the parking gap that with the intensity of land uses we needed to produce. So long way around getting to the answer. If we sort of had a clean sheet and weren't worried about the stakeholders, we'd figure out a way to put more hospitality uses and housing on the City Hall site because it would generate probably a value that would be higher.
Okay. Now, is the parking at City Hall, is that offsetting demand that's being created at other parcels?
That's correct. Right. The underlying assumption is that there is parking on the City Hall property that's required to fulfill the intensity of the other uses, including, for example, as we've talked about with Councilman Henn, the activities going on the waterfront with the yachts, so that we can figure out a way to park those folks, but also deal with the surrounding traffic.
So we are subsidizing the parking.
No, good
for
question.
Other.
We've identified that as a revenue generating use, so that we're assuming in our numbers that the users of the parking would pay for that parking.
You mean the individual
Either
driver,
two ways.
or the people that are relying on our parking to do whatever they want with their property?
A combination of both. We're assuming that either a landowner who requires parking to increase the intensity of their use, but perhaps can't fit it on their site, would have some way of either leasing it from that particular parking structure so that the city could benefit from that revenue flow, number one, or number two, a way to capture the parking needs that are already showing up to the district for uses, for example, on the charter yachts. The third potential use we identified was the opportunity to have residential paid parking within that structure, which other cities do, which could have the effect of loosening up the parking constraints on the residential neighborhoods. So someone could choose to lease a space from the city in the city garage. All of which is intended to, number one, satisfy the parking needs for the district and for the broader area, and number two, to be financially supportive of the cost of building the parking and the cost of operating it, so that the city could build it and operate it at a profit.
Okay, it seems to me that if it's such a good deal, then why isn't a private owner building a parking structure so we would have more room to do what we want on our property? But that, I'm sure, has been considered.
Mr. Rosansky.
Well, time's running late, and so I'll just be fairly brief in my comments. All along through our committee process and our committee meetings, and I think in talks with residents, I personally feel that that we need to, in some form, preserve our property anyway for a civic use. I just don't see down the road in the future, whenever that time comes, where we're going to be able to replace this piece of property. We own 3 to 4 acres of land here in West Newport, that once it's gone, it's gone. There's never going to be another 3 or 4 acres that I can see where we're going to say, okay, we need to do something, and now we got to go out and buy 3 or 4 acres and spend $15 or $20 million, or who knows what it is at that time. And so I've encouraged it through the process that we try and, in coming to some type of a plan with the 2 other property owners, that we encourage civic type reuse of this property. Some of it is incorporated in here, certainly the fire stations and the alternatives, and that's an important civic use. I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit of a lack to identify a particular use that I'd like to see here, going forward. I think that certainly we need a little more community outreach on that as to what that would be. As far as the plans that were presented, the one that really did excite me, and I think Nancy hit on it a little bit, was the one with the canal that actually connected the back of the harbor to the main harbor, because at least that solved a problem that we have with lack of circulation in the harbor. It created a significant amount of waterfront, new waterfront for adjoining landowners, not only the City Hall site, but other private property owners that might utilize that increased value of their property by being now waterfront as opposed to being landlocked. It might encourage property owners to participate in this plan, which, you put the slide up there. I mean, we're talking about in this area here, I don't even know how many, 20, 30 property owners. And, to get 20 or 30 people all going in the same direction, you have to have an incentive. Well, for me, if I own landlocked property and I was going to get some waterfront out of it, I might find that to be an incentive to cooperate. And so I thought that was kind of the most innovative idea. I'm sorry it didn't make it to the final two proposed plans here. Maybe it's not too late to incorporate some of that. It did incorporate actually pedestrian outdoor experience, which I think Nancy was looking for. There were significant opportunities to create places for people to sit and gather along the water, which really don't exist now. I mean, in Via Lido Village, there's the restaurants right up against there. You can't, unless you're going to eat there, you can't just kind of go there. The docks aren't very attractive or appealing because of the boats in front of them. So, I'm not as disappointed maybe as Councilman Solich was in the ideas, but I think there's a lot more we can do. I think there's a lot more we can do in thinking about what to do with our property. I understand that, we're one of 3 large property owners here, and we'd like to integrate our development with them. But I think this is a significant piece of property for West Newport, and we really need to think about what we want to do here, whether we want to retain a significant civic use here. And I'm not talking about putting a parking structure here. That's obviously a civic use, but, that's a parking structure, folks. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it is. Not a civic center. It's not a community theater. It's not a park. It's not a police station. If we wanted to move the police station here, I know that was an idea that I threw out at one point, and didn't originate with me. We have to rebuild the police station. Maybe we should move it to this side of town and sell the police station property in Fashion Island. Probably get a lot more money for that per square foot than we would for this, and not have a lot of the redevelopment issues associated with it. So I think there's a lot more work that we need to do on this, and I hope we'll get there.
Mr. Selich?
Yeah, just one more point before you open it up to public comment. I, too, was intrigued by the canal concept. I'm not sure what the feasibility of that is, but, that's something that would show some imagination. I mean, I could see where we could do something there like a mini San Antonio Riverwalk or something along there. It would really be something unique and be a great public space in our city. And as Councilman Rosansky said, if that's feasible to get that back in the mix in the study, I'd sure like to see it, because I think it would be something that would really add something unique and special to this plan.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is open it up to public comment. We are going to need to break at 6 o'clock for closed session, so if you could please focus your comments to 3 minutes, please. State your name.
My name is Craig Badley, and I'd just like to make a few comments. I agree with the Councilman Selich here. I'm pretty underwhelmed by these 2 alternatives. This is a site that is a gateway into the peninsula. You have the pavilion that was built over 100 years ago. You have the 2 piers. This is the probably most premier project that the peninsula certainly is facing, and the city itself is facing. I think the timeline that we have on this to try to make a decision between these 2 projects, which apparently I kind of gather a little bit of lukewarm reaction up here, is way too short. There needs to be much more thought put to this, and much more imagination. When the Crystal Cathedral was built, they brought in outside architects. You have the LA Philharmonic. You have the Secretum Hall. This is a major, major site. I think the city needs to think outside the box. Right now, we're thinking within confines of the existing zoning. There's so much restriction here, can't really do anything. I think there really needs to be some major thought here. And speaking as the president of the West Newport Beach Association, I definitely think there should be some sort of a police substation somewhere in this mix. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Stephen Flanders. I'm a local resident and also residential property owner and commercial property owner in the specific area here. One thing I was actually going to go through some of my notes, but I think I'm just going to direct it to the councilman. Councilman Henn, you were talking about the piers and that you'd like that 2B, the way that was. I drive my boat, small 14-foot, through the canal out there, and I'll tell you, with the gondolas going out and the small boats that are going out there, having anything that impedes into the the area where you go under the bridge, that's not exactly a very desirable location to put a dock there. Regarding Councilman Rosansky, two things you had mentioned. One thing was about parking, the other thing was about canal, and also Councilman Selick, I pronounced it wrong, forgive me. You also mentioned about the canal. I live on the canal, and in the last meeting that I went to, some people got excited about the canal. They said, don't you want to have that smell go away? Well, no matter where you go, you get low tide smell. Do you really want to go ahead and bring in the low tide smell into a valuable piece of property with the city hall and the movie theaters and the residential, the retail shops and the restaurants? I don't think so. I think you could do things better and cheaper with fountains and ponds. Yes, we do need tidal flushing. Tidal flushing should not go where the actual design on alternative 4, I think that's what it was. I think if there was going to be something, it should be an underground pipe that would go all the way over to the cannery area. That way you're taking care of the problem in the cannery. You're keeping it contained in a pipe. I think long ago, probably 100 years ago, there might have been a pipe, one of those stories that you hear. Also regarding parking, again, I live in the area. I walked over here, and this has been a problem for a very long time. I know you don't want to use City Hall parking for a parking structure. The fact that we have a deficit in parking, the fact that my neighborhood's affected, the fact that my commercial property also is affected by the parking problems around here, I think that the other stakeholders need to be somehow included in parking structures that don't have a deficit. You want to make sure you have plenty of parking, even if you're making it into something that has revenue, because you can go ahead and use it in the boat shows. You can use it for the anytime when we're having the boat parades or something like that.
Thank you.
We need to bring people down here, and I hope one last thing: the fire station should not be moved anywhere near a canal like the 32nd Finley Canal, because the sound will go echoing down from 32nd Street all the way down 36th Street and now into Newport Island, bouncing between those houses, off the water and the houses.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Next speaker, please. Let's let George, if we can let this gentleman come forward here first, and then we'll get to you. Thank you. Thanks, George. Can we get a microphone for the gentleman? Please state your name.
I'm known as the unofficial mayor, and you have my honor, Mr. Mayor.
You'll be unofficial mayor after I'm long gone.
Wait a minute. You talking about imagination and synergistic and innovative? I heard parking is the main purpose. We trying to alleviate the congestion. Parking is the main issue here. I heard him say he could park 180 cars. I got a plan. What I'm asking you to do is to allow me to present my plan. You talk about innovative. I got a Cobb restaurant with a bubble, Solar Green Hotel. Synergistic is a bubble, Solar Green. I got a plan to park 500 cars. Okay? When we could do the gymnasium, I'm just asking you to allow me to present my plan. I got the finance and all that to do this here. And the parking structure would generate revenue for the city. He talk about $1 million. Just allow me to present my plan, Mr. Mayor.
Share your plan with Mr. Collins here. He's our consultant on this, and I know he'll appreciate hearing your views.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. George, please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor Curry. My name is George Schroeder, and I've been a resident for 22 years. I live about 3 or 4 blocks from here. The canal plan, it was up and down so quick. It looked, that was a complete surprise to me. It did look kind of interesting. I don't know if it could work. I imagine it can work, or else it would have been drawn up as a plan. I do know that every time we get a pretty heavy rain, it does flood around Newport Island, so if we could open that up, perhaps it would solve that problem. So, I hope that can be looked at and studied. I don't know if it's economically feasible or not. Also, I wanted to say that as a member of the West Newport Beach Board, the thing that we're most concerned about here in the West Newport Beach area, living here, is the crime that we have in the police calls here. We have most of the police calls, the highest concentration is down in this area here. Councilman Rosansky did mention to rebuild the police station here. I don't know if that can be done, but every time we've had a board meeting in the last year, the topic has always come up. We'd like to see a police presence here, like a police substation, something like that. And, I'm not sure what wellness center is. That sounds like it's more for a area that has more, well, I'll just say we have more young people on this side of the bay. I'll just phrase it that way. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Next speaker, please. Mr. Rush.
Good evening, Mayor. Bob Rush, 25-year resident. 2A and 2B didn't look all that different to me. Significant amount of retail that probably will fail going forward. It seems that the retail along Puerto and Lido has had problems ever since the advent of the super malls, Fashion Islands, South Coast. These little village retail centers are going to be difficult to keep filled with tenants. Secondly, Mr. Rosansky is actually right when he says this is a very unique, hard to believe I agree with him once.
I've seen everything now.
Christmas for the next few years. So here's my problem, though. City Hall is a really unique location, and I can't believe that the best we can do is come up with a wellness center. I'm not even sure what a wellness center is, but I do believe it's tied in with the Hoag Hospital. I also am aware that over the last year, there's been a commercial marketing package distributed by one of the shareholders throughout the country. In it, they claim that this is prime location. It's the owner that has the mid-rise, the Cal Beach building, and I think the parking lot behind the church. And they claim in the package that this zoning is going to be changed to accommodate senior housing. Ironically, senior housing turns up in our plan. Senior housing has been the popular topic in all the candidate forums. Everybody wants senior housing. Who would profit? Seniors, Hoag Hospital. I have a problem with coming up with the best use of this building as a wellness center that would basically go to further a senior housing campus. Now, senior housing, I don't know if I might have this wrong, Mr. Hunt, but senior housing is nothing more than another form of group homes. And if I'm not mistaken, it falls under the same type of codification in the state codes. But I don't know that we need more senior housing, or that we need more facilities to accommodate seniors. I do believe that we need a draw here, and I think the one good thing that I saw in the plan was the boutique hotel. Difficult to put in, good use. I think we could have something more like maybe a small bowl, an entertainment type of a bowl, such as Laguna Beach has, or something along those lines. But to stuff this area with senior housing and facilities to accommodate that senior housing, I think is counterproductive. And I don't believe that it is the best use for this site. Wellness and long-term learning. We got to come up with a better idea for these two buildings than long-term learning centers and a wellness center. Could anybody define to me what is a wellness center? What is it?
Thank you, Mr. Rush. Next speaker, please.
My name is Dave Olson. I'm one of the owners over at the LIDO Drug. I guess one of the things that we think of over at our retail area over here, we're a part of the LIDO Village over here. And one of the, we look at it as this whole area is a beautiful area. It's a place that people come, they want to venture over onto the peninsula. They come from out of state, they come from Huntington Beach, all over the area. In our location, we get people in every day asking what's going on across the street. Why are there so many vacant buildings, things like that. And they want to know what's going on. And of course, we can't, we don't have any idea really of what's going to go on. I think I agree with everybody here that this place is so beautiful that it does have to have the right mix of things. I'm not sure some of the ideas on here are the right ones, but we do have to come up with something more concrete than what is here. But we also need to keep into consideration that there's people like ourselves over here that are struggling every day with what's going on. The longer that it's taken to make the decisions for all of this, and I do understand that you've got a great piece of property over here where the city hall is here, but there are people trying to stay in business around too. And the longer you guys, delay it, it also hurts the rest of us that may not be in business in 5 years by the time you guys make a decision.
Thank you. We'll try and get these last three speakers here then, please come forward and state your name.
My name is Jim Miller, and I live on Newport Island. First of all, I want to thank council for their thoughtfulness and their questions, their concerns. I was very impressed with all of you when you were addressing some important issues. The canal idea, I thought, was a useful idea. It doesn't have to be real wide, and it doesn't have to be a direct shot, but it could meander. And as everyone knows, we did have a water, we have a circulation problem, and I think that could go a long ways to help in that circulation problem. And I think it would go a long ways to beautifying the neighborhood. When people drive down Newport Boulevard, I'm not convinced that a parking lot is the first thing people should see when they enter Balboa Peninsula. That's ludicrous, and I think that was Mr. Rosansky's thought also, or one of the city council, that there needs to be something else than a parking lot along Newport Boulevard. If we had a canal that meandered with 3 lights or whatever, and benches and all these types of things, I think it would beautify the area, and I think, like Mr. Rosansky said, we need to improve this area for all of Newport. If it takes a little time, the businesses will be much better off than make an immediate decision. So anyways, thank you for your...
Thank you very much, Jim. Ms. Eberlin?
Thank you, Mayor Curry, Council. I'll try to be quick. This area is either going to get pushed or pulled up, or it's going to continue to degrade at an increasingly accelerated rate. There's one critical success factor that I feel strongly needs to occur, and that is that there needs to be an anchor use that's here. And this is a destination. We need a use that's going to be concerned both for the beauty and the access and the maintenance of the integrity of the coastal area, and also somebody that understands how to build surrounding compatible uses. To me, of everything that I've heard and everything that I believe, it's a hotel, an upscale luxury hotel. Resort-based hotels are used to doing master planning in resort areas because they think not only about what's going to work for them for beds, which are revenue generating for the city, but they also have learned to think about what goes on in the surrounding area. They've already figured out, the smart hotel developers and operators have figured out how to leverage their property and make it synergistic not only with commercial uses but with the surrounding residential area. So for example, they figured out that they can create leverage by getting the right mix of retail in around them, the right mix, getting athletic facilities that can be clubs as well as for residential surrounding area as well as the commercial. So by committing to some kind of anchor use, I feel that the council could actually go out and get some good innovative thinking about all the land, inclusive of the city property, from some of the people that may have an interest and generate a competition, if you will, for extend invitations to people that are in the resort business to come and actually provide some type of master plan concepts or ideas that would work, not only for commercial, but for, and that will inherently elevate the value of the area, and it'll get the right perspective on whatever type of retail, other commercial, or residential components need to be included. Thank you.
Didn't give your name.
Pardon? Denise Oberman. Thank you.
All right, last speaker on this. Yes, ma'am, please come forward. State your name.
Mary Fryer, and I really second a lot of what she said, and in fact, mine's just goes a little further. We really need what I call a hook, something exciting for people to come see. I just didn't see that in here. I don't know, oftentimes it's simple. I think of the Peabody Hotel in St. Louis with the ducks that go up and down in the elevator, or the feeding of the fish at a certain time, you know, a certain kind of marine type of thing, or a certain type of boat to come see, or, you know, we need something exciting for people to see. And I just didn't see that in this at all. He mentioned the outdoor movie theater, you know, or maybe a band concert area like they have in other places. But I do think a hotel is probably reasonable here.
Thank you, ma'am. I apologize to the audience. We need to cut this off so we can get to closed session, but I appreciate all the very thoughtful comments. It's pretty clear we're going to be back talking about this issue before with the community. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on an item of public comment not on the agenda?
I did want to make a comment on this agenda item before we break from it. We are planning to deal with this again in both meetings in January. Seems to me the first meeting in January, we need to try and accomplish a couple of objectives here. We're going to want to talk about the City Hall site reuse, but let's come back again in that first meeting in January and see if we can reflect some of the comments that were made here tonight in terms of perhaps, you know, this tour boat thing creating more flexibility to create more excitement in this and outdoor use in this plan. It seems also to me, the more I look at this, the more I realize that Via Lido Plaza and the city property are really linked properties and really need to be viewed together in terms of as a site, if you will, and maybe that will release us to think more about some excitement in that area. That's the area that I think we really need to improve the excitement of. Lastly, we need to bear in mind that we do not have the luxury of unlimited time to do this, because property owners need to move on with the utilization and the development of value out of their properties. And if we don't get a plan here that works for the property owners' near-term needs, they're going to move ahead, and we're going to wind up with real sub-optimization of this plan, no matter what we would like to see. So we do need to move forward as fast as we can with this process so that we don't lose the opportunity that's in front of us here. And I just want to make sure we clearly understand that.
Thank you, Mr. Hinn. Seeing no speakers for public comment, we will stand adjourned until 7 o'clock.
Mr. Mayor, may I
yes.
just, simply for the record, may I please, before we take
Mr. Hunt. Mr. Hunt.
The council has received a letter challenging the closed session with respect to mooring issues. I need to enter on the record the issues that supports the closed session. Based upon the specific facts and circumstances surrounding moorings, I've had multiple communications with an attorney on behalf of the Mooring Association. It's been clear in his written and oral communications that litigation is being considered by the Mooring Association should the council accept and move forward regarding a fee hike. Those are specific facts and circumstances that support a closed session of the Brown Act, and it's justified under Government Code Section 54956.9B. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt.